10.3 Unity and Sectionalism. So we have come to the end of this chapter 10, and we're going to talk about two opposing issues. First of all, obviously we've been talking about the growth of a country, but then in section 10.3 they're going to talk about this issue of sectionalism growing. So as the period starts, one of those questions that we talked about was, why was the U.S. so unified during Monroe's administration? And the main reason that we were so unified is that there was the death of basically one of the parties. The Federalist Party pretty much dies out, and due to it dying out, we pretty much have an extended period of little political infighting, which we of course refer to the era of good feelings, which we've talked about before. But also, there's just basically more nationalism in the country. We've just emerged from the War of 1812, and we have growing types of industry, and we have new types of technology and growth of roads and things like that. So that's the thing that's going to unify us. But we're also going to talk in this section about the idea of sectional leaders and who they were and what they stood for and what they stood against. And then finally the section wraps up with the idea of some international politics and how certain lines on the map become a little bit more formalized, and then it's going to end with a foreign policy statement about the new emerging small power of the United States in the world. So let's get started here. First thing I always show is a map. This is the way it would have looked in 1817, as you can sort of see. You can sort of see the pink area are all the states. This kind of mustardy kind of color is all the territories. And then you can sort of see areas that we were not yet in possession of, but other countries were claiming areas what today is the United States. So you can see down here in Florida, you can see over towards Texas and the Southwest, and then you have this unclaimed territory that will eventually be known as Oregon country. So if I throw up two other maps here, you can sort of see that map of 1816, 1817, and then the way the country looks just 4 years later. So this Missouri territory becomes now the area of Missouri, which will eventually become a state. You can also see some other places that were Mississippi territory becoming the area of Mississippi the state, and then Alabama. So pretty much they do a lot of splitting. So you can sort of see they do the same up here with the territory that was Illinois territory. They basically finish that off. You get the state, and then now you get Michigan territory takes over that. So the country is expanding, but remember, where the place it ends is right along the Rocky Mountains here, and then this, of course, would be New Spain or Spanish Mexico. So this is the area that these sectional leaders are dealing with, is a growing, emerging America. So let's just throw that chart up that we kind of handed out in class, and we're going to go through this point by point. So John C. Calhoun was the sectional leader, and he was basically, take a look of John C. Calhoun. Here he is as a young man. He was a war hawk, pushed for war with Great Britain, but eventually he is going to kind of flip-flop in his positions. At first he's going to be a big nationalist. He's going to support tariffs and support internal improvements, and then decide that's not really best for the people of his section, which is going to be the South. So John C. Calhoun's going to serve in the Congress for more than 25 years. He's going to be right up there until the age of the Civil War. He's going to die in 1850, about 10 years before the outbreak of the Civil War. But he is going to be very influential during this time period, and eventually he's going to be Vice President of the United States. So he is from South Carolina, so he's going to represent the interests of the South, and the issues that he basically supports, that we kind of mentioned here, is that something known as state sovereignty. Sovereignty means like control over a certain area of power. And so what state sovereignty, for most of the kids want to understand, is it's about states' rights. It's more the idea of the state directing its own affairs rather than the national government. And so there's this big tug of war between federal power and state power, and John C. Calhoun is definitely on the side of state power. He also then switches, like I said, he then opposes tariffs. Tariffs are those taxes on internal or imported goods. And he also is opposed to internal improvements, roads, canals, bridges. Now, kids are like, why would he be opposed to that? Well, when the federal government comes in and decides it's going to build a road or something like that, they are in control. And so what he was more about is that if they were going to build things, then it would be built by the state of South Carolina. So it can basically call the shots. With federal intervention and control, you lose that kind of power. And so John C. Calhoun was not about that. The next one that I want to throw in there is Daniel Webster. Okay, Daniel Webster is a representative of the section of the North. He is actually born in New Hampshire, but he is going to recognize and represent Massachusetts. So here's Massachusetts, and then we have a good old picture of Daniel Webster. So I throw this in there to kind of get you guys understanding that this is the age of the development of the photograph. I'm pretty sure this might be actually maybe a drawing based on a photograph, but the photograph and things like that begin to emerge around the 1830s, 1840s here in America, and then more so in the 1850s. But he is going to represent the North, and he's going to be the opposite of John C. Calhoun. He is actually going to support tariffs. And tariffs are going to be very important to somebody that's from the North in the New England area and the people that he represents. He's really not into this idea of sectional politics, but he sort of has to play the game because he realizes people like John C. Calhoun is going to be doing that. So the reason why he supports taxes on imports is because you have to remember where he's from. He is from New England, so the reason he would support them is that those taxes protect American industries. Remember, the emergence of the Industrial Revolution happens in New England. So one of the biggest producers of textiles in the world is Great Britain. So New England merchants are in direct competition with merchants from Great Britain. So if you are going to try and compete with them, a way that you do that is you make your competitors' goods more expensive. And the way that you can do that is by putting tariffs on those. All right. So that's Daniel Webster and John C. Calhoun. We're now going to get into Henry Clay. Okay, Henry Clay. So, this one last one I always forget about adding in there. In one of the speeches where he's debating somebody actually on the issue of slavery and the idea of perhaps the country starting to split apart and feel these different tugs of different types of loyalty, he basically stepped forward and said the famous phrase, "Liberty and union, now and forever, one and inseparable." The idea that our country cannot be cut apart, and if it is, it would be death to the Union. So he doesn't want that. So here's the last guy. This is Henry Clay, and Henry Clay is from Kentucky. Okay, he's going to be around a long time, just like John C. Calhoun. So he's going to look like this towards the end of his career. This is a painting of him. I believe it hangs in the Senate. And actually, he was around again for photography as well. So this is him towards the end of his life. Henry Clay is going to live to 1852. So these three guys are all going to be contemporaries, is the word, of each other. Okay, so he's going to represent the West. He's from Kentucky. Okay, and what he believes in is this thing known as the American system. And the American system is a collection of tariffs that raise money so they can use them to basically build internal improvements. Also, with that money from tariffs, he's going to deposit it in that national bank. That idea that was Alexander Hamilton's brainchild back in the day, yes, it's still around. So we'll come back to that in 1 second. The other thing that I want to show is that he's very much also opposed to sectional politics, but he is a man who basically worked with compromise, trying to come to some solution between varying and differing sides so they can have some type of agreement. Now let me just jump back to this map here that I usually assign. So I want you to take a look at it because it basically shows the various sections of the country. And I know we've looked at this differently because we've looked at it like with the 13 original and then the ones that enter between 1791 and 1803. But this is about sectional politics. So a person like Webster would be representing the interest of the people in this general section, running from Maine all the way down and ending with Pennsylvania and New Jersey. And then the southern interest of Calhoun would stretch with Maryland and Delaware all the way down through Georgia, the newer states of Alabama and Mississippi, Louisiana that came in 1812, and then Tennessee. And then a person like Henry Clay would represent the interest of the West. So you can sort of see Ohio and Indiana and Illinois in his home state of Kentucky, and then you have Missouri here at 26. Now, the other areas that are colored here are not yet states. So yes, I know it looks just like Florida that we know of today, but it's actually Florida territory. This area would be Arkansas, and then Michigan territory up here. The remainder leftover portions of the Louisiana Purchase are right here, and eventually they're all going to be subdivided and broken into various territories, and then those territories will become states. And last but not least, Oregon country is going to be the want of both New Spain, Great Britain up here in Canada, and even the Russians coming down here. And then, like I said, you have this area of New Spain or Spanish Mexico as of 1820. So we're going to end it right here because I do want to kind of move forward with some agreements, and I want to pick up with the most important one, and that would be the Missouri Compromise. So we'll end it here and pick up with a discussion of the Missouri Compromise with the next presentation.